perpetual redundancy in your equipment and not in your teams. We're only talking about forestry and wildland forestry ventilators. What we have is a problem that I've solved completely, meaning constant pressure. There's constant water that is always being made into fog bubbles all the time. There's always a static state of pressure, and what is happening at the same time is that you have a system that is redundant, meaning your diesel engine, your diesel generator is always producing electricity for your lights. All right, sometimes we do these wildland forests 24 hours a day, go out to the middle of friggin' nowhere, there's no natural light. You need to have lights and you need to be able to see in the dark. So you have to have a battery system. So you have to have a system of redundancy that constantly has a backup for a backup for a backup for a backup. And I'm going somewhere with this because you need it for your air system. The reason why is because now that we've changed the whole game as far as like wildland forest fighting is concerned, is we're no longer using water like we did before. We now have a system that uses like 80% less water, and it uses chemicals that won't kill us or give us cancer. You could literally mix the ingredients in your kitchen at the firehouse. The three ingredients is pretty simple. It's potassium, it's car wash gel, and then if you can get carbon dioxide capsules or tablets that are like this big, just anything like that. The other stuff is all frequency and lights and modulation of sound. So we'll get into that later, but you need to have a constant state, a steady state of water, a steady state of electricity, and a steady state of me losing my memory. Air, water, and electricity. Air is what powers everything, especially if you have this is a wildland forestry situation. So we're only going to talk about that because these things were originally designed just to drive by themselves in a forest fire and just make a forest like a tormenta, like a hurricane, and just let these damn things drive and drive and drive in the hot zone where you know that the air direction is going that way or this way or that way, and it's run by LiDAR, which can predict the air. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Predictability, huh? So you don't have problems. So you have to have all these three things because what happens is there's always something that breaks. There's always something that is going to break down eventually, especially these new systems. You don't understand the terrain. You don't understand that we're not dealing with fires that they have their own environment, their own ecological system. They have their own weather system. And what we're doing is using it to our advantage because if we know the direction of the air, if we know the advanced movement of the fire, then these things can operate on their own. But they won't work if you don't have the three things in a system of redundancy. Your water is always going to be operated by your pumps. So it's one of two types of pushing through these systems. It's either air or it's the mechanical pump that's set up with it. And the other thing I want to mention too, and this has gotten frowns from everybody that's talked to me about this, they say they want 3-inch pumps, okay? What I'm proposing is to micronize your systems. You don't have to have, you could fit the biggest pumps in the world on these trailers, but the problem is the weight. It doesn't help when it comes to efficiency. So I'm basically taking a Mack truck size motor and then putting a Volkswagen a turbo diesel, all right, that has so much 100,000 compression, and you're working on high pressure, low volume. And the reason is you do not need high volume when you're making fog. All right, yes, you do. You get it eventually, but it's not what you're thinking. You're thinking fog nozzle. I'm talking about fog ventilators, fog turbines that are this from the smallest little bitty ones that I said were like electric airboats. They have 6,000 watt electric engines. Okay, these things are powerful enough to push a John boat and haul ass through the Everglades if you want. But instead of doing that, we're doubling down on both sides of it, and then the outside of the motors, outside of the blades, is that we're doing what's similar to that of a Tesla turbine. But instead of it being just a straight shot, we're actually we're gonna do like the snail, caracol, what it's called, in the center. And on the back side of the fan, this is the coolest part, is that if you know anything about sound, I found some way, I looked back in some old records. This blew my mind, okay? If you guys know this or not, I'm a rock singer. I've been doing rock and roll, and I've been learning about amplifiers. So while learning about fire in the Fire Science Academy, I'm watching some people do some experiments with sound. And what I discovered is that the same frequency that is used to modulate a voice, to give it more of an echo. An echo would be, some of you guys like karaoke and you like to sing, but you turn up the gain all the way, and the reverb. So what produces reverb? What happens when you are singing into a fan? You're singing into a fan. What's happening is that the frequency that is coming out of your mouth is hitting the frequency that's coming from the fan, giving you that robot voice. You see what I'm saying? So that's an interesting observation, because how would you like to be able to just speak one time through a microphone and just be able to speak to the forest and all the fires go out just like this, just like that? That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about finding a frequency inside of the fire that affects it so that it breaks the fire triangle, even if it's temporary, because you always have to deal with the temperature factor. Even if you take away the oxygen, you still have hot coals that are down below a lot of the grasslands and stuff like that. So what I'm proposing is this sort of a completely different approach to firefighting and forest fires. And this has worked over and over and over again now for, I think, over 1,000 years. As far as the civilization in Zacatlan de las Manzanas, get sound effects. Zacatlan de las Manzanas in Puebla has a large plume of fog that comes out of the mountains every single day that goes up to wherever the pressure is the highest, and then it cascades over top of the entire town every single day for recorded history. Now, the interesting thing about this is that all it is micro bubbles. It is a combination of wind, humidity that gets picked up, and it's heavy. It's very, very heavy. So instead of it raining like this, basically all the pressure comes down, and the combination of the hot air and the cold air produces this steam-like event. And with the help of the air pressure, which by the way is predictable. So anybody that tells you all these are wildfires, they're out of control, every single wind situation, a hurricane, a tornado, whatever it might be, is trackable. All satellites, anybody that tells you otherwise is full of shit. That is the reason why they don't give the fire service access to cameras. That's why they don't give the fire service access to satellites, because they know that all these resources are being wasted. They know that millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars are being spent unnecessarily on stuff that can be preventable and combatable without any risk to human lives. And I stand behind that 100%, because this has all been a setup. We have an old system. We have a regulatory system for firefighting in Europe and in the US and in everywhere else. And everywhere else mimics those systems. And when they're wrong, you can't stand up against them without getting canceled. So allow me, as a retired guy who doesn't work, who teaches these things, what happened and where we went wrong, and how we can correct all this stuff by using less resources, by using equipment that is roboticized, that is explosion proof, meaning that if it is what happened last week is we had a very large gas truck a gas tanker that had flipped over on the highway. And of course it exploded because you have to take water and just cool down the bottom of this tanker. The problem is you can't get close enough to this tanker because it's on fire. So what I recommended is that we take electric wheelchairs, hook them up to air-powered motors, and we put a system, this ventilation system that rotates like an oscillating fan. But this fan is so fucking strong it'll knock your dick in the dirt. But it's all hooked up to 12 horsepower pressure cleaner engines that have these cooling heads. The cooling heads are literally 0.2 micrometers. They're super microscopic heads. So they produce the same fog that I was able to reproduce the same fog that I was able to see in Puebla. The thing about the fires in Puebla is it never happens because every single day this area of Puebla gets hit with all of this beautiful fog every single day for hours and hours and hours and hours, literally till 12 o'clock noon. Then the sun kind of peeps its head out, and then the rest of it's a beautiful blue sky day. And then it gets extremely cold. So there's all these elements that keep the fire triangle from happening. Because if you don't have the oxygen, okay, you cannot keep the fire going. If you don't have the fuel, for example, gasoline or wood or paper or whatever it might be, then the fire is not going to keep going. And then there's the temperature. Did you know there's a formula for fire that if a chemical is a certain degree, like for example, gasoline ignites at like 86 degrees, right? So let's say that we want to make that temperature 80 degrees, so it won't ignite. You follow what I'm saying? When it comes to temperature, if we could change one molecule that breaks the fire triangle in the smallest scale, it could work on a larger scale. So what I'm proposing is that these little miniature trucks or trailers or whatever you want to call them can be used portably, remotely, and can be used to hose down, fog out, bubble up, whatever you want to call it, whole forests from the mountaintops all the way down using minimal water. The same concept is used in Wildland de las Manzanas with the fog. The difference is that the fog is not all water. It is a chemical. It's a wetting agent. It's a wetting agent that if this gets stuck to a tree, for example, or a pile of leaves, that even if the fire hits it, that yes, the temperature will affect it, but it's not going to evaporate as if it was just water. These are sticky microbubbles, miniature bubbles, just like you would wash your damn car with, but we made them airborne. And they have carbon dioxide in them. And they stick to everything. So you get an oily feeling when you feel wetting agent, basically the same shit. All you got to do is have water tankers on standby to hook these two, fill them back up. You have the system of constant, perpetual redundancy. So you got water filling your tank while you're running your pumps. Secondary tank is being filled and filling the primary tank. Same thing with your electricity. You might have solar panels, big fucking whoop-de-doo if they don't have sun that day. And a lot of times when you're on these fires, there are no sun visible. It's all black. So you have a redundancy system of a diesel engine. Now the only thing you can't reproduce is the fuel yet. I think that we can do that too. I think diesel fuel can be produced in your house. Another way of using potassium, what's a potassium? Whatever type of potassium is, I don't remember. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I know. But you can make diesel fuel in your garage. You just need the right equipment, you need the right materials, and you can produce your own diesel material from used oil. So all of these things are going to be a future reality. The reason why I say we have to miniaturize is because there's going to come a day where you're not going to be able to fill up your machines with 120 gallons of gas or diesel. You're not going to be able to do it because it's not going to exist anymore. So what I'm proposing is to have a constant state of renewable things and things that are not renewable, like diesel fuel, unless we make our own. Because basically, I see the world as it coming to we're wasting so much material, we're wasting so much resources that there's got to be a better way. I'm not the first one to think of this stuff, and I'm not going to be the last, but I'm going to at least tell people who are unaware that there are other ways to handle fires. There are very simple solutions to firefighting, and I want to start with Argentina. Okay, Argentina has a very serious problem in their wildland firefighting. They do not have water. So what I'm going to propose is that every single team down there that has access to agricultural fans is that they retrofit and just use basic, they call them cartridges down here, but it's all pressure cleaners. Pressure cleaners that have multiple heads on the bezels of these extractor fans, if you will, that have the capacity to blow long distance. And they have to be explosion proof. Sometimes you'll use these on the highway if you want to set it up to cool down a tanker truck that's on fire or that needs to be cooled down, because they have to be cooled down and you don't want to put your people at risk. So you run these little robots out there and they'll just oscillate and they'll blow all this fog onto these trucks and keep it cool. It works. We do not need to put our men at risk for stuff that we know is going to happen in advance. So I have invented a reinvention of stuff that's already been invented 100 times. You and your kids have played with remote control cars before. There is nothing stopping us from scaling that up. Okay, I'm starting off with, we're starting off actually with electric wheelchairs. Electric wheelchairs have a lot of torque. And all they need to do is just drag out whatever that we're going to be firing on these fires. We can operate everything from behind. We can make the hoses as long as we need to. So there's no excuses for us to combat things up front when knowing the risk is there. We can evade the fucking risk by using robots. This is so easy. This is not new either. All of this is agricultural equipment that's been retrofitted. Did you know that I can buy a steering wheel from my 1978 Volkswagen rescue truck here, and put a steering wheel on it, and I can program it to go on any road, anywhere I want, anywhere in the world, even in the woods. Program it to drive exactly so many kilometers per hour, and simultaneously have a pump that is sitting there blowing fog into the woods. You see what I just did there? I eliminated the risk to human life. It's 100% 365 degrees visibility. We have remote systems where we can watch. Obviously, video cameras that can see through smoke. LiDAR systems that see 3D through trees. So there are all these systems that are not being utilized right now in any forestry service except for in Mexico. And possibly the future is now in Argentina. And I put my money on Argentina because they have a serious problem that can be solved with just a little bit of agricultural equipment. And so I'm going to shut up right now because no one wants to hear me today. So everyone wants to make a lot of fucking noise, including the dogs and neighbors and everybody else who's here. So I'll see y'all later. Okay?